getting somebody that can shoot, that doesn't have to have the ball in his hand, but can if it's something that's asked of him, was exactly what they needed to go after.
The trade, real quick. Desmond Bane for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and 2 guaranteed years left, because you'll probably opt in next year, at about $22 million each. Also, Cole Anthony's expiring contract and 4 unprotected first-round picks, number 16 overall this year. The Suns pick from 2026 and the Magic's unprotected picks from 28 and 30 with a swap in between that's lightly protected in 2029. All that for Desmond Bane. At knee-jerk reaction, I was like, this is a lot. And then the more I thought about it, the more I looked into it, I was like, no, this is actually a really good trade, potentially for both teams. What was your initial reaction when this went down? Because you said you were poolside. Were you like, oh, that's a lot? Or, oh, Desmond Bane is going to be in Orlando?
Yeah, I mean, that was my first reaction. Was the second part was that the Magic got a guy that can help them win in the immediate future, and that was the goal going into the offseason. They weren't going to have the free agency money to spend like they did last year, which, by the way, they did not spend well, which is part of the reason why they had to give up as much as they did to get Desmond Bane, because the KCP deals, that was a bad contract. It just didn't work out. So that was my first initial reaction. I did a segment the day after they got eliminated from the playoffs on my show, because I was railing against my audience throughout the short duration of the series against Boston. All Magic fans could talk about is, what's the offseason going to look like? I'm like, just enjoy the playoffs. You waited all year to get here. Just enjoy this moment. And so that would frustrate me. The day after, though, it was like, okay, now it's time to have these conversations. I had 2 names at the top of my wish list, and I had like 3 different lists. I had pie in the sky, I had realistic, and I had I'm happy to settle for these guys. My pie in the sky options were Tyrese Maxey 1, Desmond Bane 2.
Wow.
So I could not have been happier. And we'll dig into the haul that they had to give up to get him, but just to give you an idea of how much I wanted the Magic to have Desmond Bane to begin with, he was number 2 on my wish list.
I really liked it the more I dug into it. One of the things that I thought was in Orlando's advantage was because Paolo Banchero's still on his rookie contract, which it's not like a true, like it's not the rookie contracts we grew up around, but it's still going to be only like $15 million a year next year, which is to say, this is like when you have a quarterback in football on their rookie contract and your team is all of a sudden 11-6, and it's like, oh, we could actually try to make a run here. Let's get him a big time wide receiver. Let's go out and get whoever the $30 million receiver is. You have a year where Paolo Banchero's still on his rookie contract before he inevitably gets his max, and it's like, oh, you can take in Desmond Bane's salary, no problem, and then kind of figure this out later. The team will get expensive, but at the same time, you can do this now, see what it looks like, and then reassess next year if it's like, all right, what happens to Wagner, what happens to Suggs? If nothing needs to happen to them and you just pay more money to keep the team together, you could do that too. But Desmond Bane made $34 million last year, first of a 5-year deal. Then it'll be the 36.7 this coming year, 39.4, 42.2, and then 44.9 in 2028-29 when he's going to be 30 years old, which I think it sounds like a lot to some people, but that is good value in today's NBA as the cap will continue to spike and NBA inflation continues to become a thing. And I think the fact that he's already locked into a deal is actually a good thing for Orlando, especially a deal that is going to age well with a game that I think will age well too.
Well, and I think that was part of what they were looking for. If they were going to go out and get anything that resembled a star, and I think that's another conversation to have about where Desmond Bane even fits into that conversation. But I would say, especially in the East, he's an all-star caliber player. This isn't LA. This isn't New York. The Magic, I think it showed a lot of self-awareness with the contract that Desmond Bane has already, and saying, we need to get somebody that's locked in to a deal because we don't want to get into a situation where they don't want to be here. This isn't glitzy enough for them. So let's get somebody that we don't have to even think about that. Age-wise, he fits the timeline because he's just 26 years old, but you also don't need to worry about the headache of having a conversation about any sort of upcoming extension. Does this guy want to be here? Because that's always part of the dialogue whenever people talk about, oh, we'll go trade for Kevin Durant. What if you get 1 year of KD and then he says, I'm out. I don't want to be here. This isn't good enough for me. I think when you deal for somebody that has multiple years left on their contract, that's just one less thing that you have to worry about.
Since becoming a full-time starter, Desmond Bane's finished fourth, second, and third in usage on his own team. We know why, because Ja Morant and also Jaren Jackson Jr., there was a year or two of Dylan Brooks in there, which is to say, though, and this is another reason I like this trade, he's not going to have the ball all the time because he can catch and shoot. He can play off of other guys. He's going to be a great release valve in the offense, I think, around Paolo Banchero and obviously Franz Wagner too. He'll probably be third in usage behind those two guys, which I think is a plus because that means Jalen Suggs could also save some energy for defending, of which I think he's defensive player of the year level good, Jalen Suggs, on the perimeter. And I'm looking at just not really needing the ball like that. And he can do things with the ball. Like he's gotten better as a playmaker. He's really good as a shooter, as a career 3-point shooter. He has an exceptional 3-point percentage.
I think what they've been after is they want as many players on the court in terms of the core guys that are going to play the most amount of minutes per game. They want as many players as they can get that can set up an offense to where you can't really predict what it's going to look like possession by possession. And Desmond Bane helps you continue to do that. Paolo Banchero can take the ball up and distribute, or he can just rush, he can just drive to the rim, and that can be your offense for a possession. Franz Wagner can do the same thing. Jalen Suggs is not the world's best point guard, but he's good enough to do it here and there throughout the course of the game. And Desmond Bane is the same way. So it allows you to play this like amoeba offense where nobody has a defined role. It is just simply everybody's a threat. Everybody's a threat from most areas on the court, and we can kind of switch things up throughout the course of the game. I think that's where Desmond Bane helps out a lot. The catch and shoot is probably the biggest factor, though, because they obviously had to get better at that. The Magic were the worst 3-point shooting team in the NBA, and they were definitely the worst by the time they got into the playoffs. And so getting somebody that can shoot, that doesn't have to have the ball in his hand, but can, if it's something that's asked of him, was exactly what they needed to go after. That's why he was number 2 on my list. The Magic needed to get somebody that didn't require the offense to run around them. Like the idea of Trae Young coming to Orlando sounds nice. I think it's more of an NBA 2K move than a real life move because everything revolves around Trae Young. You can't bring somebody like that in and not play Trae Young ball. This still has to be Paolo and Franz's team with a really strong, efficient additive to that offense. And I think that's what Desmond Bane provides without losing your defensive identity. And when you start to factor all of that in, okay, somebody that can play make but doesn't have to have the ball in their hands, somebody that can catch and shoot and make threes at a really high clip, somebody that's not going to be exposed defensively or drag down your overall defensive rating, which is really the lifeblood of this team, and they're in their prime athletically. If you said, okay, I'm going to lay out all of those bullet points, how many players in the league are we talking about? That's why Desmond Bane was so high on my list. That is a really short list of players that fit all of that criteria. And then, oh, by the way, on top of that, the team that you're calling has to be willing to take your phone call, which also eliminates a good chunk of other players that you could have gone after. I think that list is incredibly short, and I think we could probably count it on one hand in terms of players of that caliber that can do all of those things that teams would actually be willing to deal.
This is another interesting part of the Desmond Bane trade. I don't think Orlando's out of bullets. Now, from a draft pick standpoint, you don't have a lot left to play with, but you still have, just from a purely contractual standpoint, like in terms of matching salary for somebody, not Miles Turner, because I think Indiana keeps him, and if not, he gets overpaid by somebody else to the degree that Orlando can no longer do, even if they could to begin with. But Wendell Carter Jr. is going to make 10, and then his extension kicks in. He's at 10.8 this coming year, 10.8 million. You still have Goga Batazzi at 8.3 this year, and then it descends to 7.6. One of my favorite things that Orlando's done is just hand out all these descending contracts, which I think
That's
is
like
really, really smart.
that is their brand for sure.
So right there with Wendell Carter and Goga Batazzi, you're looking at around 20 million between those two. You still have, I mean, Gary Harris has a team option, a 7.5. I don't know what they're gonna do there. Probably decline it
I would think so.
unless
Yeah.
they accept it just to move him. But like I think they probably just decline that. But you have the Goga and Wendell Carter contracts, and it's like if you have about 20 million there roughly, you attach something to that. I mean, maybe you can get a big also. You know what I mean? Like I wonder how far they would be off from like a Nick Claxton or something, but I don't think Nick Claxton, Wendell Carter Jr. is like a big enough difference for me to make that trade. For example.
Probably not. And they value continuity like crazy here.
Yeah,
So
I would keep
could,
Wendell Carter in that example. Yeah.
plus sure. Angel Reese comes to the games, and I don't know how much value that adds, but that's at least part of it because they're.
That's right.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I didn't know. So sidebar, I had no idea that they were dating. And I'm like, why is Angel Reese at every Magic game? This is so random. But yeah, they're together. Rebounding machines, the two of them. But here's another aspect to this.
More so her than him, admittedly.
Well, for sure. For sure. That's her bread and butter. How does Mo Wagner factor into all of this? Because they had a log jam in terms of their bigs last year, and that sort of sorted itself out because all of them dealt with injuries, and Mo Wagner was actually out for the year because of the ACL injury. But having all three of those guys on the active roster, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. And with just how important, you look at a team like the Lakers that clearly needs to add a legitimate 5 to their roster, and there are other teams that are like this, and the Magic have 3 of them. Well, they have 2 right now, but I view Mo Wagner and Franz Wagner as a package deal. I think Franz is better because his brother is on the team, and I would think that he's a max guy with the team, that he has some pull. Hey, I want big bro to stick around. They have a great relationship with each other. They play on the German squad together, and Mo Wagner's an energy guy too. So like, it's not like he's just there like Thanasis. He can actually play.
And he was hyper efficient last year too.
Yeah, and I think he could be the starter. So I think you could probably, I don't know, tell me if you think this is realistic, get a first-round pick back for Wendell Carter Jr. and then re-sign Mo Wagner and slide him into that starting 5 role.
I just wonder if Mo Wagner is going to be able to start the season healthy. I guess because he got hurt during the year last year.
He probably doesn't play until, I would guess, like early December.
Yeah, I think so. I think he doesn't start, but I do think if he did, he probably wouldn't play that many minutes either. Like, I think what they kind of want, or what they should want at center, is can they make their own Gaffley, which is basically what we were calling them in Dallas when they had you could play 48 minutes of Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, like have one on the court at all times. Basically, it's kind of like a cheat code, and it's like, oh, you go from one good center to another good center. I think Orlando's like tried to do this, and I think with Wendell Carter Jr., injuries are always going to be a concern, but I think he's good. But I do think, like, would I investigate upgrading that spot potentially? But I think even right now, if you're just looking at the team, Suggs, Bane, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr. And let me ask you this. One, how good do you think, like, where would you slot them right now? Because the not price-wise necessarily, because you're not going to get value on that right now because the number
got slashed in half. I think that's probably a little extreme.
You got to wait till other moves anyway. But like I'm going to be looking at their over. I'm going to be looking at them to win the East. I'm going to be looking at them to potentially win a division. If Miami gets KD, I think that becomes an interesting sort of race between the two of them. And I'm not totally out on the Hawks for some reason. But I think Orlando like can be really good next year. And I thought that even before this. So where are you at with them just in general expectations and how they could stack up with the Knicks, whatever we see of the Celtics next year, the Cavs, another year of Indiana, who may look exactly the same.
Probably.
Where are you at with that?
Yeah, and I think that Indiana probably creates maybe a false expectation for people like myself who spend so much time looking at the Orlando Magic or wherever you're at. If you are a fan of or an analyst for an Eastern Conference team, you can look at Indiana's roster and say, well, my squad is as good as that. And if I start to look, I thought about this today. I was driving around and I'm like, would I trade Orlando's whole roster for the Pacers? And I don't think I would. And that team's in the finals and has won multiple games in the NBA finals.
I'm telling you right now, that team in Indiana is fucking up a lot of people's heads.
Exactly.
Because
that's my point. So you say, where do they
fire
slot
their
in?
Coach, y'all got Desmond Bane. Like, there's other teams are gonna be like, wait, they're in the finals, and it's like they might win the championship.
I think your question is absolutely fair. It is valid. I'm not sure that the ranking matters as much as it used to in the NBA as far as how teams stack up against each other before the season starts. I think we're now in this era where it's a little bit like Major League Baseball was like this for a while until the Dodgers created a super team where it was just you had to be good enough and then get hot at the exact right time. College basketball can be a little bit like this.
Football, NFL.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where we're at in the NBA right now. Is your team good enough to compete is like a binary question. It's a yes or a no. And then you just have to be healthy and flip that switch at the exact right time. That's my cop-out answer, but to not completely avoid the question that you asked, I'd probably have them firmly in fourth. I still think Boston's better. I still think the Cavs are better. Well, yeah, that's true. God, the Achilles. That's really going to fuck up their season.
Because I think with Orlando, what I would always say about this was, I remember asking Matt Moore, who we both work with, in a preview that we did here for the playoffs, which team is most likely to pull off an upset, you think, of the 7s and 8s in round one? And he said Orlando because of the way that they play against Boston. Even when Boston's healthy, they just can't score enough is the problem. And I think now I want that's the series I would want to see next year.
I know.
I want to see, although I don't think it'll be a 7-2. I think it might be a 4-5 or even a 3-6, depending on what happens with the Celtics. Is there pressure to win now in Orlando? Is there pressure to be 50-win team, top 4 seed, win a playoff series? Coach Mosley, does he absolutely have to advance this, or are they going to look elsewhere? How does this all sort of look in Orlando right now?
I mean, Tibbs got fired. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, so every coach in the NBA lives on the hot seat. Yes, Jamal Mosley definitely needs to win. Last year they won 41 games, and their big three, Paolo, Franz, and Jalen Suggs, barely played together all year. So when you take that into account, it was still a pretty impressive season. But that's also making an excuse for them. There's absolutely pressure. I think the pressure is more so on the front office, which makes this trade of mortgaging the future that much more interesting, because if this doesn't work out, it doesn't matter to those guys that they traded a bunch of future first-round picks. They're not going to be here anyway. Jeff Weltman's the president of basketball operations. Anthony Parker is the general manager. He was recently upgraded to general manager. John Hammond, formerly of the Milwaukee Bucks, was the GM for a while. He's still kind of hanging around in an advisory role, but they're all tied together. They've been here since 2018, so that's 7 years. And the first couple of seasons was about, let's just regain a little bit of respectability. They went to the playoffs with the Vooch, Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier team. And then they realized what we all knew. That team wasn't going to get you anywhere. So they blew it up. And then they bought themselves some rebuilding time. Every front office goes through this where they come in, they assess things, then they blow things up, and then the clock really truly starts. And so when they traded Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets and they traded Vooch to the Chicago Bulls, that's when the clock started. Then they got the first overall pick. They got multiple firsts, Jalen, Franz, both lottery picks, Paolo, first overall. This is now the first real move since blowing up the team to try and win a championship. And if this doesn't work, and it needs to work pretty fast, then we're going to be looking at a new coach. We're going to be looking at a new front office. And I always find it interesting when a front office that's sort of at their, I don't want to say they're on the hot seat. I just think they're at the natural end of the progression of how long a front office gets and the moves that you're allowed to make before your job is on the line. That timeline is coming up.